and a series of deadly storms have ripped across America, wreaking havoc on thousands of people, hundreds of thousands without power. These are deadly storms, and we're still expecting to see more of these. And joining me now is CBN's Drew Friedrich. Drew, you're with Operation Blessing, and you guys are on the ground and you're helping out. This has been a crazy string of storms going on right now.
It has, Dan. Honestly, it's really been 2 months. I mean, for us, it started in Ohio, then it moved to Louisiana, and then just recently, I think last week, there was over 100 tornadoes that hit. So we've got teams kind of dispersed. We're wrapping up some work in Nebraska this week. We've got guys on the ground in Texas with flooding that's going on there. And so we just feel like we're kind of going in every direction, but the Lord keeps opening doors for us to go minister, so we're going to keep showing up.
Yeah. What are the types of, I mean, obviously there's, we can see in this footage here, a lot of houses just completely torn apart. What are the main sorts of needs that you guys are seeing right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, is in the immediate aftermath, oftentimes it's like food and water, because people's homes have been destroyed and so they don't have anything. Their, refrigerators are gone. But also a lot of what we've been able to do is to really help cut down trees that have fallen on houses, make sure that there's no further damage or injury to people by those, trees or limbs moving. And so we've got heavy duty equipment, we've got chainsaws, we've got teams of volunteers kind of removing that from people's houses. If the house is still intact, we're often tarping those houses because, you're never too far away from a rainstorm after a tornado, it seems. And so we're trying to keep whatever's left in the house intact, dry. And so really that's a lot of it. And then there's always the cleanup process. So we've got a great partnership with the Home Depot. We're able to provide Home Depot cleanup kits that we pack with our volunteers, and they have things like gloves and trash bags and masks and all the things you might need to begin cleaning up in the aftermath of a storm like this. And so the needs vary from storm to storm, obviously, but typically what we see is just destruction that we can help kind of clear and begin to give them a chance to rebuild from sort of a fresh surface.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the storms are kind of still coming, and like that's got to be an extra weight. I mean, people get displaced from their homes. Some people maybe just their home isn't completely destroyed, but they've got damage. And then now these rainstorms and hailstorms come in, so it's kind of like it's kind of like getting hit with another round, uppercut right after you've just been, smacked in the face. Yeah. It's a tough 1-2 punch there.
Yeah, it really is, and that's why it's so critical for us to have great partnerships on the ground with local churches, because they're there for the long haul. We often can kind of park one of our tractor trailers there that's full of these relief supplies. And so, again, your need on day one might be different than your need on day 4. You might not need a tarp day one. Maybe you just need food and water. But because we've got these long-term partnerships in these communities, we're able to offer those solutions over the long haul. But it really is challenging. In fact, the challenging part for us as a leadership team here is trying to make sure that our own people aren't in harm's way as well, because we can't provide any help if our people are in trouble. So trying to kind of navigate all that where there's so many tornadoes and storms across the whole part of the country has been a bit of a challenge for us, and it's been a busier season than normal. And you just see, it just tends to happen to some of the poorer communities, seems to be where some of these things happen. And so, you go in and you want to just be sure that people are safe, that they've got, food and water to feed their families, and or at least for several days right afterwards. And nobody's immune to storms, certainly, but oftentimes it's those folks that don't have the resources to kind of get back up on their own 2 feet. That's where we can step in with our church partners and really provide some help.
Yeah. And for people who want to help, make sure you go to ob.org. You can go there. You can chip in. You can, if you can't physically be there, like a lot of people can't, that's a great way to help out. So tell me about, you mentioned the churches that you're working with there. Tell me about what some of that looks like. And obviously people going through, and you mentioned a lot of these poorer communities going through something like this, there's obviously a spiritual element too, right? It's one thing Absolutely. If it's just a little bit of damage and you can rebound quickly, but when your whole life is upended, so people have sometimes been in these houses for their entire lives, and
Sure.
then to have it all ripped apart, I mean, that is a very tough experience for anyone to go to, and it can be a trying time spiritually. So what sort of efforts on that front do you guys engage with the churches?
Yeah, the churches are really a critical piece of what we do. It does give us sort of a home base of operations. So, oftentimes folks will come to us and they'll submit work orders and say, hey, I've got a tree that's fallen on my house, or I need some help, mucking and gutting. There's damage and there's water in my house. I need to pull out the carpet. So that's part of it, is just sort of a base of operations. But really it gives us a distribution hub to hand out things like food and water and hygiene kits and these cleanup buckets. And also, they provide volunteers for us, which is really a critical piece because we want to touch as many lives as we can, and we can only send so many staff members. So volunteers are a huge piece of it. The churches play a massive role in that. And when the volunteers from these churches go out with our teams, the thing that maybe differentiates us from some of the other nonprofits that might show up is we bring the hope of the gospel with us. And so we're out there being able to pray with people and really remind them that though this is a very, definitely a challenging day, there are better days ahead, that God is still with them in that moment, and that there's hope ahead and better days ahead. And so, those teams being able to pray with them is often such an encouragement when they can be so down and so devastated after a storm like this.
Yeah. And so, as we mentioned, there's obviously a lot of storms happening across the U.S. right now, but this isn't the only area that you guys are involved in. I wanted to show this clip here of what's going on in Brazil. And take a look at this. I mean, they're flooding absolutely crazy. They're comparing this. Some people are starting to say this might be as bad as Katrina was back when that happened. I think in 2005 that was. But the flooding there right in the midst of a city, and you can see these houses completely underwater pretty much. Horse standing there on top of the roof. This is from a local TV news station down there in Brazil. So talk about how you guys are able to help in Brazil and what you're trying and what they're going through there and what you guys are trying to do to help.
Yeah, I think the challenge, there's so many parts of Brazil that are very developed and are robust, but also there's places where the infrastructure is just not as strong as it maybe should be. And so we've got a team from 5 different countries across Latin America that have all gathered in Brazil, and they'll be providing medical care and clean water and hot meals for people who've been displaced, hygiene kits. Same kind of thing that we do here. It always looks a little bit different depending on the country that we're going to. But as you can tell, I mean, there's a horse standing on a roof. That's not something you see every Thursday,
No.
So for us, it's a chance to go in there and really be able to again, link arms with local partners. We've got great church partners around the world, and be able to say, what are the needs here? We always want to be sure that we're not just providing a cookie cutter solution, but that we can identify what's the greatest need in this community and how can we do that. And so that's one of the real blessings of Operation Blessing, is that we're a global organization. We've been trying to build some strength and capacity around the world so that wherever something like this happens, we have a team in the region that can respond. And so, as I mentioned, we've got a team pulled together from Latin America, 5 different countries, that's going to show up in Brazil and bring hope to people there in the midst of this. And the challenge is really right now, Dan, waiting for this water to recede, because you can't even get to some of these houses right now. It really is a challenge until that water starts to pull back.
Yeah. When did this flooding start? I mean, it started a little while ago, right? I don't know which day. Let me know what day it starts. But like you said, they've been waiting for this water to go back, but it's still there.
Yeah, we started, talking about it on our end Saturday here, but it had already kind of begun a little bit before that. Saturday is when we begin to see, entire roadways washed away, bridges collapsing. And so that's when, as a group, we're having to go, from this side and say, are we going in or are we not going in? What can we do? We never want to go in if we can't provide a solution, then you're just in the way. And honestly, with all the storms here in the U.S., it wasn't getting as much news coverage. And so you have to say, hey, are people going to stand with us and give to support these efforts? But there comes a point for us, especially where we work in Latin America heavily as Operation Blessing. We felt like we need to go because it's the right thing to do. And so our guys were passionate and asking us for permission to go. We put them on a plane. We sent one guy from here in Virginia Beach. And so it's been a week of kind of planning and linking and making connections and preparation. And they hit the ground, actually getting there today, some of them. But we've already been kind of doing some work behind the scenes, and we're linking to provide these hot meals, to make sure that we're giving clean water solutions, providing medical care. You can imagine when roads are collapsing and people are evacuating quickly. I mean, they're leaving all kinds of things behind, medicines, things that they're used to having on a regular basis, they just don't have anymore. So, and then internationally, it always evolves. Again, day 1 looks very different than day 5, than day 10. So we always try and be adaptable and flexible. We got a great group of guys who have a passion to help.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I think it was Hurricane Sandy. I live in the Northeast here in the U.S., and I think it was Hurricane Sandy. Just the way it worked out is I was without power for a week. And even here in the States, when you have access to so many things, and I wasn't flooded out like they were in that picture where you couldn't get around very easily. It wasn't quite that bad. We just didn't have power. And what a hassle that was for my life, like just to try to get basic things done that you just don't think about doing, right? And just, your fridge, like I couldn't keep the food cold, like just stuff like that. And I saw that in Brazil, they were saying food supplies, like how do you, food trucks aren't coming through and people aren't able to move things around easily. So now that's been going on for almost a week or more. And it's just, you can imagine just how difficult that is for people on a day-to-day basis right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Texas, back here in the U.S., there's similar flooding, and just yesterday, some of our staff was actually out on an airboat with one of the local constables, bringing boxes of food to houses that were otherwise unreachable by car.
Mm.
And so it's those kind of solutions where you have to have local partnerships or establish them when you get there, because those government officials can make all the difference between us being able to provide help and not provide help. And so we're looking for the same kind of relationships in Brazil. We're asking donors to stand with us so we can make sure that we're providing support there. But really and truly, these are truly disasters and they're life interrupting. And so we're just trying to give people a chance to kind of get back on their feet in the aftermath and then begin to look for opportunities to set them up for longer term success, in the coming days and weeks to follow.
All right. And again, if you want to give, that is go to ob.org. You can find the links to give there, and you can help these efforts that Drew and his team are doing in all parts of the globe, here in the United States, of course, but in places like Brazil. Great efforts. And like he said, they're bringing the gospel and spiritual help along with them as well in the midst of these deadly storms. So, Drew, appreciate all your guys' efforts, and I appreciate you stopping by for a few minutes here to talk about it with us.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much, Dan. Great to be with you.